What happens when a manager looks an entire room full of reporters directly in the eye and tells them, and every team complaining behind closed doors, that their frustration is completely pointless? Not diplomatically. Not carefully. Not with the practiced vagueness that most managers deploy when a question carries the potential to ignite a controversy that follows them for weeks. Directly. Bluntly. With the particular confidence of a man who has thought this through completely and arrived at a conclusion he has absolutely no intention of retreating from. Manager Murphy didn't schedule this moment. There was no prepared statement. No communications team hovering nearby with approved talking points. Just a question from a reporter, one of those questions that lands in a press conference and immediately changes the temperature of the entire room, and a response that nobody in American baseball media saw coming. Complaining is pointless. 5 words. Delivered without hesitation. Without apology. Without any of the careful hedging that surrounds most public commentary on the subject of Shohei Ohtani and the extraordinary accommodations that his presence in professional baseball has generated. The room went quiet for exactly 1 second. And then the phones started moving. By the time the press conference ended, the clip was already spreading. By the time the evening broadcasts ran, it was the lead story in baseball media across the country. And by the time the full weight of what Murphy had said settled into the national conversation, the debate it ignited, the reactions it drew from managers, analysts, and players around the league, it became clear that this was not simply a press conference moment. It was a statement. About Ohtani. About the rule. About the future of this sport. And about what it means when one player's existence forces an entire league to reckon with standards it has never had to confront before. Stay with me. Because by the end of this, you will see the Ohtani Rule, and Murphy's remarkable defense of it, in a way that changes how you think about what Shohei Ohtani actually represents for baseball. Before we can understand why Murphy's rebuttal caused the stir it did, we need to understand exactly what the Ohtani Rule is, and why it exists at all. Professional baseball has always had rules. Thousands of them. Governing everything from the precise dimensions of the pitcher's mound to the specific materials allowed in the construction of a baseball bat. The sport is, in many ways, defined by its rulebook, a document that has evolved across more than a century of competitive play and continues to evolve as the game itself changes. But the Ohtani Rule is different from virtually every other rule in that long history. Because it was not created to address a problem that had existed for years and finally demanded a solution. It was not the product of a committee reviewing patterns of behavior across multiple seasons and determining that a standard adjustment was needed. It was created because of one specific person. Because Shohei Ohtani does something that the rulebook, written across generations by people who understood baseball deeply, had simply never anticipated needing to address. He pitches. And he hits. At the highest level. Simultaneously. In ways that force the designated hitter rule, one of baseball's most significant and most debated structural elements, into a situation it was never designed to handle. The Ohtani Rule, in its essential form, allows Ohtani to remain in the game as a designated hitter even after he has finished his pitching duties for that game. Without this accommodation, the traditional rules would require him to either stay in the lineup as a pitcher, occupying a spot in the batting order that pitchers historically fill with minimal offensive contribution, or leave the designated hitter role entirely once his pitching was done. Neither option makes any sense when the player involved is Shohei Ohtani. And so the rule was created. Specifically. For him. And that specificity, the nakedness of it, the way it announces openly that one player is so far outside the normal parameters of what baseball had imagined possible that the rulebook itself needed adjustment, is exactly what has generated so much ongoing criticism from teams, managers, and analysts around the league. The complaints about the Ohtani Rule did not arrive suddenly. They built gradually, the way most serious criticisms in baseball do, through quiet conversations in dugouts, through whispered frustrations in front offices, through the kind of off-the-record commentary that journalists collect over time until the accumulated weight of it demands a public response. The core of the criticism is straightforward. Other teams, other managers, argue that the Ohtani rule creates a competitive imbalance that goes beyond what normal roster construction advantages produce. That having a rule written specifically to maximize the value of one player, who happens to play for one specific team, crosses a line from accommodation into structural favoritism. Some managers have been more vocal about this than others. Certain front office voices have pushed back through official channels, questioning whether a rule created for a single player sets a precedent that could produce complications the league has not fully thought through. The debate has been genuine, serious, and ongoing. And it arrived, eventually, at a press conference where a reporter put the question directly to manager Murphy. What do you make of the criticism surrounding the Ohtani rule? Most managers, in that moment, would have found a way to acknowledge the debate without fully entering it. Would have offered something measured and inconclusive that satisfied nobody but offended nobody either. The safe path. The expected path. Murphy took a completely different one. Complaining is pointless. Let's spend real time with this response. Because the more carefully you examine it, the more layers you find inside it. On the surface, it reads as dismissive. As a manager simply refusing to engage with a debate he finds tiresome. And several analysts, in their initial reactions, characterized it exactly that way, as avoidance dressed up as confidence. But that reading misses what Murphy was actually doing. Because the sentence that followed, the full context of his response that the headlines inevitably shortened into that single opening line, revealed a much more sophisticated argument than simple dismissal. Murphy's complete position, as it emerged across several minutes of press conference exchange, was built on a foundation that was difficult to argue with honestly. His essential point was this: the Ohtani rule exists because Shohei Ohtani exists. And Shohei Ohtani exists as a two-way player at this level because he has done something no human being in the history of professional baseball has done. He has sustained elite performance in both pitching and hitting across multiple seasons at the highest level of the sport. The rule did not create Ohtani. Ohtani created the rule. And complaining about the rule while failing to acknowledge the extraordinary achievement it was designed to accommodate is, in Murphy's judgment, both intellectually dishonest and competitively pointless. Because no amount of complaining changes what Ohtani can do. No amount of rule debate removes the reality of facing him in a lineup after he has already thrown 7 innings on the mound. The competitive challenge he represents is not a product of the rule. It is a product of the player. And managers who spend energy resenting the rule instead of preparing for the player are, Murphy suggested, directing their energy in exactly the wrong direction. The room absorbed this in silence for a moment. And then the follow-up questions began, sharper, more probing, more genuinely interested than the usual flow of a baseball press conference. Murphy had said something real. And the room knew it. The clip moved fast. Faster than most baseball press conference moments do, because most baseball press conference moments don't carry this particular combination of directness, controversy, and subject matter. Shohei Ohtani attracts attention at a scale that very few athletes in any sport currently match. When his name is attached to a story, particularly a story involving a genuine public debate about rules, fairness, and competitive structure, the audience is not just baseball fans. It is the broader sports media ecosystem, and through it, an audience that extends well beyond the traditional boundaries of the sport. By the morning after Murphy's press conference, the major sports networks had all run segments on the rebuttal. Analysts were divided, genuinely, interestingly divided, in ways that reflected real disagreement rather than performed controversy. One camp sided strongly with Murphy. Their argument was clean and compelling. Ohtani earned every accommodation the rule provides through sheer, undeniable, historically unprecedented performance. Complaining about a rule designed to properly incorporate a once-in-a-generation talent into the existing competitive structure is, in their view, exactly as pointless as Murphy suggested. Adapt. Prepare. Compete. Stop complaining. The other camp was more nuanced but no less serious. Their concern was not with Ohtani specifically. Virtually nobody in serious baseball analysis argues that Ohtani doesn't deserve the recognition and accommodation he receives. Their concern was structural. About precedent. About what the existence of a player-specific rule says about the league's broader approach to competitive equity. About whether the willingness to rewrite rules for one extraordinary individual creates a framework that could be misused or misapplied in ways that haven't yet been fully imagined. Both arguments have genuine merit. And the fact that Murphy's 5-word response generated enough heat to sustain both of them across days of serious media discussion tells you something important about exactly how charged the subject of Ohtani's place in the sport has become. Here is the part of this story that gets lost in the noise of the rules debate. The part that Murphy was pointing toward, even if he didn't spell it out completely. Shohei Ohtani did not ask for a rule to be written for him. He did not lobby for special accommodation. He did not approach the league with a proposal for structural adjustment that would maximize his value and create difficulties for opposing teams. He simply performed. At a level that the existing rules were not equipped to handle. And the league, faced with a reality it had not anticipated, adjusted accordingly. This is not the first time in baseball history that extraordinary individual performance has forced structural reconsideration. The sport has always evolved in response to players who pushed beyond the boundaries of what had previously been imagined possible. Rule changes, equipment adjustments, strategic innovations, all of them have at various points been driven by the appearance of a player or a pattern of performance that the existing framework could not adequately contain. What makes Ohtani different is the scale and the specificity. The rule created for him has his fingerprints on it in a way that no previous baseball rule adjustment has had on any individual player. It is named, informally but universally, after him. It exists because of him. And it will exist, in all likelihood, for as long as he continues to do what he does. Murphy's point, delivered bluntly, without apology, is that this is not a scandal. It is not an injustice. It is the sport doing what sports do when a player arrives who exceeds every previous framework for understanding what is possible. It is baseball saying, "We have never seen this before. We are adjusting. Deal with it. Strip away the controversy. Strip away the media reaction and the analyst debates and the follow-up press conference questions that tried to pull Murphy further into the argument than he was willing to go. What remains is something simple and genuinely important." Murphy was not just talking about the Ohtani Rule. He was talking about how competitors respond to challenges they cannot control. About the fundamental choice that every team, every manager, every organization faces when they encounter something in the competitive landscape that they didn't create and cannot remove. You can spend your energy resenting it. You can argue about it publicly, push back through official channels, make your frustration part of your team's identity and your own public narrative. You can do all of that. And at the end of it, Shohei Ohtani will still be in the opposing lineup. The rule will still exist. And you will have spent energy on something that changed nothing. Or you can do what Murphy suggested. Acknowledge the reality. Prepare for it with everything you have. Direct your competitive energy toward the actual challenge rather than the theoretical injustice of the challenge's existence. And compete. This is, at its core, a philosophy about competitive maturity. About the difference between organizations that grow stronger by adapting to difficult realities and organizations that exhaust themselves resenting the same realities that everyone else is also navigating. The managers and front offices that figure out how to compete effectively against a team with Ohtani, not by wishing the Ohtani Rule away, but by building rosters and strategies genuinely capable of matching the challenge he presents, those are the organizations that will define this era of baseball. Murphy was telling his peers, publicly and without softening it, that this is the only path forward worth taking. In a media landscape that runs on controversy, that rewards the hot take, the outraged reaction, the carefully escalated debate that keeps audiences engaged across multiple news cycles, Murphy's response was almost disorienting in its simplicity. He didn't escalate. He didn't perform outrage or perform sympathy. He didn't position himself carefully within the debate to maximize his own profile or protect his relationships around the league. He said what he genuinely believed. In 5 words. And then he stood behind it. Complaining is pointless. Not because the concerns raised about the Ohtani Rule are trivial. Not because structural debates about competitive equity in professional sport don't matter. But because in the face of Shohei Ohtani, in the face of what he actually is and what he actually does, the most honest, most productive, most competitively intelligent response has always been the same. Adapt. Prepare. Compete. Everything else is noise. And Murphy, in one press conference moment that the American media is still processing, said so out loud. The debate about the Ohtani Rule will continue. The complaints will not disappear overnight. Rules written for one player carry questions that don't resolve themselves easily or quickly. But somewhere in a preparation room, a manager who heard Murphy's 5 words is already moving on to the only question that actually matters. How do we compete against Shohei Ohtani? Because complaining about him was never going to be the answer.